Thank you, Representative Hinojosa. Your amendment specifically states that they have to visually observe the offense. Is that correct?
That is correct.
They as in the peace officer.
That is correct. Currently, the legislation says it's illegal if they unlawfully enter the country. But how do you know if someone has unlawfully entered by looking at them unless you see them unlawfully enter the country? That is the only way you can know they are in violation of the law in that way. And so this amendment clarifies that the officer who in this case under this legislation is judge, jury, and executioner for some, sending them to a country that perhaps they do not know, perhaps sending an American citizen who does not have identification with them to a country they do not know, because this officer is making a determination without seeing them cross the border. So this amendment clarifies they have to be seen crossing the border.
So currently, as it is written, this bill allows a peace officer to detain an individual for unlawfully entering this country without actually knowing if in fact that individual did. So you represent Travis County. Is there a port of entry or a border in Travis County?
There is not.
I represent Dallas. We're about 500 miles away from a border. Yet this bill allows these individuals, these peace officers, to also come into my community and detain somebody if they entered illegally through a port of entry. Is there anything that in this bill allows for there to be any actual knowledge of a peace officer having that knowledge in Travis County or Dallas County that somebody came illegally through a port of entry?
There is no way for an officer to know that you came illegally unless they saw you come illegally. That is the only way they can know. So right now in my district, here in Austin, here downtown, somebody can be picked up, taken to a border because maybe they don't have ID to show they're an American citizen. If I'm exercising, if I'm jogging in Austin, I don't have ID with me. So, and let me tell you, I get calls in my office that say, go back to where you came from, right? So if somebody sees me and thinks because of what I look like, because of the color of my skin, that I am here unlawfully, that I unlawfully crossed the border and didn't cross at a port of entry, then they can take me to an American citizen to the border? I mean, this bill, because we indemnify everybody who does it, there are no consequences to doing that wrong, to getting it wrong, and there's no way to know you're getting it right unless you see somebody unlawfully cross the border.
And the bill's author continuously says that this issue is supposed to address undocumented immigration. However, giving powers to individuals who have not witnessed there actually being any illegal entry or entry into this country without authorization, there's essentially no actual way that anybody any peace officer in my community or your community will know that this is the case unless they are racially profiling or specifically selecting individuals of a certain race or color or another national origin. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's no requirement that the officer get confirmation from federal immigration officers, from any kind of database to show they are in this country illegally. There is no requirement of that in this bill. This bill is a racial profiling bill because there is no way to know somebody came into this country illegally. And what will happen, because what already happens, is that people will be suspected of being here unlawfully because of the color of their skin. I have an affidavit here from a DPS officer, right? Somebody who ostensibly should be trained in this kind of thing because they're all at the border right now, right? But I have a sworn affidavit from Kinney County here that is a DPS officer who wrote that he identified a smuggler because the smuggler had in the front seat of his car a person who he identified the smell as an odor that is associated with human smuggling. Undocumented aliens, this is a direct quote from his affidavit, undocumented aliens emit a distinct odor due to sweat and being exposed to the environment. So here is an officer, a DPS officer, who already is making some kind of crazy assumption that someone is here unlawfully because of the way they smell. I can only imagine that when you expand the scope of officers who now are judge and jury and decide your fate with no judge hearing evidence, weighing evidence, that all sorts of decisions like this will be made erroneously, and they will be based on nothing more than ethnicity and race.
So what you're saying is, without visual proof, a DPS officer, a Texas peace officer, can quote unquote identify an undocumented, in their mind, an undocumented immigrant that merits questioning their validity or their ability to be in this country based on a smell. That is a statement from a DPS officer based on the way an individual smells in their mind. They can identify whether the person is here with or without status in this country. Is that right?
That is an affidavit from a DPS officer on June 19th, 2022 in Kinney County.
The unfortunate thing, Representative, are you familiar with Operation Wetback?
I am not.
Operation Wetback happened in this country during the Eisenhower administration, where U.S. citizens were rounded up, including undocumented immigrants, but records say up to 1 million U.S. citizens or 100,000 U.S. citizens were also rounded up. So we have a history in this country where they rounded up U.S. citizens, many at that time that looked like you and me. During the committee hearing, we heard also from our Asian community, from our Arab community, from communities all over the country of this racial profiling. So is it your understanding that something like this, without visual proof that an individual crossed the border without status, without legal entry, is it your understanding that these peace officers will use this as a free ticket to implement a new form of Operation Wetback in Texas, because the likelihood of you being stopped versus the bill's author being stopped vary tremendously? Is it your understanding that this would be something similar to that, where we had the roundups of U.S. citizens after World War II being deported because they no longer wanted their labor, and they grabbed people like you, like me, like our families who are U.S. citizens, but just on the way they looked? Is it your understanding the likelihood that you versus some other members in this chamber will be detained?
It's not just my understanding that that's what will likely happen. It is my sincere belief that that's what we are encouraging to happen when we are saying an officer does not have to take you to a judge to decide to weigh the evidence. An officer can just pick you up. You don't have an ID to show you're an American, pick you up in Austin, Texas, take you to the border, to the Mexican border, and drop you off there. Yes, because of the color of your skin, because how else would anyone make a determination that you are here unlawfully, that you crossed the border unlawfully, unless they saw you cross when they're not required to get that confirmation from any kind of federal database?